All right, gang, I'm here with poor Romanian immigrant, Paul.
Hello, how's everybody doing?
We're going to talk about some things we think are interesting, but you may not, and I don't care. So, you said you wanted to talk about a combination of things: mythos, logos, how stories sort of reflect a pattern that's in life, and how religion and mythology is sort of like an undercurrent, I guess, for everything. And what we were talking about upstairs earlier was Buddhism and the modern conception of Buddhism. We think of it as this, and I've heard this from a number of people who are like, well, if there's any religion that I would subscribe to, I'm totally atheist. I don't believe in anything. If there's any religion I subscribe to, it's going to be Buddhism. And it's just like socialism in a way. We have this idea in our mind of what that is, and I don't think it's what that is. So tell a little bit about Buddhism.
So, just to begin, since we have a lot of stuff to talk about, just want to introduce myself real quick. Name is Paul, Tao of a PJ on Instagram. I was born actually in Romania, in Transylvania to be correct, in '85, and I lived there for 5 years until the revolution. So I'm really acquainted with communism and socialism and all these things.
And how wonderful it is.
When I was young, my dad was kind of an entrepreneur, and he just tried to get us the best things. And at the time, the best things were like Levi's jeans and Coca-Cola.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
American shit.
So if you had those, you were considered revolutionary. So we had to leave the country, obviously. And then I left in '89, and November of '89 I left. And in '90 I got to Italy. Took about 2-3 days to get there. It was right at the end of started living in Italy in 1990s. I lived there for 10 years, and then actually around the same time in '99 I moved to the States. With freedom, yes.
The initial move, you said, was because people perceived you as other.
Correct.
By having the Western shit. Were you guys wealthy, or is it that's like your dad or your family saw that as this is the shit to have?
Right.
These are good things.
Imagine my dad we lived in an apartment block. It was a huge, it had 3 stairs and it had 30 apartments. One of those Eastern blocks you see in
what they describe as the brutalist.
Exactly.
As far from Logos as you can get.
So we lived there, but we had MTV and we had a satellite, which at the time was a satellite antenna, which at the time was unheard of. So the whole neighborhood would come and we're bawling. So the whole neighborhood would come and, watch MTV at our house. And now I think it's hilarious. But back then it was dangerous. You know what I mean?
My dad is a general handyman. He can do plumbing, electrical work, any number of things. He's a carpenter for 25 years. And got a pretty cush job now, and I think he's retiring if he hasn't retired already. But we had cable, and we shouldn't have had cable. So the ladder goes up, and then 5 minutes later we have
cable.
Every channel on television. And so
Tom and Jerry's up.
I noticed though, when I was a kid, my friends and I never really watched TV, and I think it may be that my parents just pushed us outside. Yeah,
I think I did spend most of my life outside, especially like a hood rat in the communist hood. You know what I mean? Fighting with gypsies and doing stupid shit. But
what was Italy like? You were young there.
I was young there, and I was the only Romanian. So I've never been an in-group anywhere. So leaving Romania, going to Italy, I was the Romanian kid. Going back to Italy, I was the Italian kid, that had nice clothes and stuff like that.
A different style,
exactly,
different way of talking.
So never been in-group anywhere. And even here now, I'm like,
Yeah.
hey, the Romanian guy
Like
with the
Dracula.
Borat accent, So I've grown up like this, and I've gotten used to it. And before it was like a feeling of shame, but now it's kind of like a feeling of pride in the sense that, yeah, I am different, but at the same time, I'm here and I value the same things that our, the forefathers of America valued, which
Yeah.
was freedom, independence, and all these things.
And so something we were talking about a little while ago, you recognizing those things and placing those atop the value hierarchy. Why do you think you have those values, whereas my conception of people who are from where you're from are strongly nationalistic but also socialist and for redistribution and things like that? How do you think it is that you and I share the same values when I grew up in American materialism? Is it genetic? Is it that mind, body, spirit thing?
I think,
all of them?
Yeah, that's a very difficult question, and I think it's layered like an onion, right? So I think, and I hate to say this, but I think there's different ways. I hate to say this. There's different ways that people think, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some people are much more subject to propaganda, and
Yeah.
some people are much more subject to external influence.
Right.
And some people, like the chart that you had on Instagram, extrovert versus introvert and all these things, right? So I have always found myself, since I've never been an in-group,
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't be very extroverted. So I always find solace in introversion in the sense of, books,
Yeah.
sports, but mostly like singular sports, right? And even when I was young, I played basketball, but, I was the best guy on the basketball team because I worked the hardest, because I had to show the
Even
natives.
though I'm out,
Even though I'm out, you guys want me because I'm better than all of
Sure.
you, so I'm gonna win for the team.
That's another interesting thing. Like the career field you occupy and have occupied puts you in 1% of 1% of 1%, so to speak. So in the other nations that you've lived in, or like throughout your life, have you noticed that you sort of just slide your way up the hierarchy?
I mean, I think that, and
Slide is a stupid word because you just mentioned how like it takes work to be good at
yeah,
this.
it's a lot of work to be good at anything, right? And that's the point. Work, I think, is the point. And the Romans used to call it virtus, right? The virtus, and that word derives from, virility derives from virtus, and the virility to act is not exclusively a man thing, it's also a woman thing. It's not a masculine thing, it's a feminine thing, but regardless, it's still virtus.
Yeah.
So the Romans admired all classical societies admired this kind of virtus, whether it was in a woman or a man. But I feel like that at the same time, this kind of virtus is exactly what's being attacked in society nowadays.
Well, and so my mind jumped when you said virtus, virility, same root. The attack on creation.
Exactly.
Not in like a God creating the word, but the masculine and feminine combining.
Correct.
And we don't want people to have children. We don't want truth, like virtue, truth, delight, that source thing. We're looking at that and rejecting it, and it's not just we're rejecting truth. We're rejecting the thing that is the embodiment of truth. That two things come together to form a perfect union, and creation is the result of that union.
Right.
You're right. I mean, systemically, we're rejecting it.
Yeah. So it's funny you say that, because I've been reading stories to my little girl. She's 2.5, and I've been reading Rapunzel. And in Rapunzel, it starts with there's this family who lives across a witch. So like they share a wall with a witch, and the woman in this family keeps seeing how beautiful the lettuce in the witch's garden is, and she keeps prodding the man to go and steal some. She's like, "Oh, I can't live without this lettuce. You gotta go get it, right?" So the man sneaks out. The man sneaks out, goes, grabs the lettuce, and gets caught. So the witch is now, oh, you're going to pay for your insolence. And he's like, no, well, my wife, she really wanted the lettuce. He's like, oh, your wife wanted the lettuce? Okay, you can have as much lettuce as you want, but you give me your first child.
Yeah. You're married.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, that's kind of like the government. You see what I'm saying? It's like, you can have all the lettuce you want, but give me your first child so we can repeat this cycle of...
I want your productivity.
Exactly. And then you put this beautiful thing, which is Rapunzel, you put her in a tower and you seclude her there, right? Until what? Until the prince comes and rescues her. Until Virility comes again, climbs the tower and rescues her from the evil witch.
Yeah,
right?
and it seems like it's on repeat.
It's on
All
repeat.
These stories. Here's what happens when you get the properly oriented masculine and feminine together.
On all traditional stories. Yeah.
And modern stories, film, television and stuff like that, are they hitting the mark, or is it disguised in some way, or am I too dense to recognize that archetype? Like, I see it in Lord of the Rings, obviously. I see it in what I consider to be great stories. Usually those are film adaptations of books. So I don't know that I recognize that we watch these superhero movies, we watch Batman and stuff like that. Do you see the same thing in those stories?
I see, well, I put myself in the director's mind in a sense, and you're like, you want to tell a good story. Well, then how are we going to tell a good story? There needs to be a bad guy, there needs to be a good guy, right? And then from there we develop any story. But any story that is a well-developed story has to have a mytho-poetical justice to it, in a sense. So you can't tell a good story unless you have the Balrog.
Yeah.
You can't tell a good story unless there's a Joker, right? So now, what attributes are we giving to those bad guys? And to me, what I've seen a lot of inversion of the attributes given to the bad guys. A perfect example now would be Thanos in the Marvel, universe or whatever.
He's the like, even if you haven't seen it, you recognize him as the villain.
Virility is the bad guy, in a sense, like, Thanos is one jacked.
Yeah.
He's got a massive jaw, and
he's inarguably masculine and detached.
It's completely stoicism, right? So in the DSM now, they just made stoicism like a mental something's wrong with you if you're stoic.
But if you're confused about your gender identity,
you're good to go. That's normal.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I don't know that this is true. I haven't actually consulted DSM. Someone told me this, that pedophilia is to be named as a...
normalized.
Well, obviously
sense,
normalized.
yeah.
I mean, look what we're doing. But it's not a criminal offense. It's something that we need to push for rehabilitation for someone who's victimizing children. We need to accept it like it's like depression.
It's a slippery slope from the light, you know what I mean, to what we can tolerate. And really, I blame us for letting it happen.
Well, it's a fun slide.
Yeah.
It's a fun slide. If I accept that there is no one to hold me accountable for my behavior, I can go as far down that wormhole as I like.
I'd pick a better word. It's a seductive slide.
Yeah.
It's a very seductive slide.
It's not as fun as it is. It's enticing. You try to. So I'm going to stop drinking coffee.
Yeah. And
so I decided that during finals. I realized I was drinking 3, 4, 5 cups of coffee a day. I have to do it. And then I thought, I don't have to do it. And I say this to people all the time. I'm trying to quit smoking cigarettes. Well, what do you mean trying?
Yeah.
Bruce Lee, I guess. Right?
Yeah.
There's no try. There's
Yoda.
All of them. all of those
them,
guys are saying the same thing, and it's beckoning to you. And I'd imagine, like, I've not been addicted to anything in that way. I've seen a lot of addiction in my life, but I've never been grabbed by something in that way. And I feel like, habitually I'm drinking coffee. I get up in the morning and I drink coffee. I don't feel like I'm thinking about it when I get up. It's become behavioral, and I notice when I don't have it, it's not like there's this pull on me. So we've talked about this before. Have I transcended that thing? Am I just not subject to that seduction, or why is it that some people get just grabbed by things, but I don't feel like I have that trait, if you know what I mean.
Some people need to fill the void with something, right? And I think materialisms provides covers all the bases, provides all the voids, right? And I think it's been like this since the beginning of time. It's not now. It's like extreme, right? Because we have everything. We have, your microphones from China or like whatever. You can get anything from anywhere. Before we were more in tune with nature. We didn't have all this electronics with us and connected to my phone nonstop and all these things. But instant gratification is the most seductive and easiest path.
It's our religion.
It's our religion, right? So when I feel like, no, I don't want it, and something that it's consumed by the masses, in the sense I'm not like anybody special or anything, but I've noticed that the more people have it, the more wrong it is. You see what I'm saying? At least in my opinion, because the majority of people are not to demean anybody, but they're not people. They're ruled by something.
The NPC meme.
They're the NPC meme, right? So if you're ruled by coffee, if you can't even function if you don't have coffee in the morning, right? Then that thing has power over you, and somebody has power over you because somebody's bringing you the coffee.
Yeah, and we dismiss it with a joke.
Exactly.
And like these phrases, I'm not even human until my tattoo artist said this to me. I'm not even human until noon. And if I wake coffee, like I can't even think of these stupid phrases right now.
Yeah.
But you know what I'm talking about? Like I'm dismissing what is probably a mental illness, something that has a hold of me. I'm dismissing it as this is tolerable.
Yeah.
We're back to tolerance.
It's really interesting because I've been reading this book. It's called The Language Crystal, right? And it's basically one of the deepest rabbit holes I've been in, which is language. And in language, for example, in the Bible it says that the word of God is everything.
That's what it
right?
is.
That's what it is, all of it. So if you think of an addiction, A meaning without, diction. So the word.
Absence of the word.
So now if I'm addicted to coffee, I don't have a word to say against it. So it rules me.
Yeah.
So what am I addicted to? So I sat down and was like, okay, what are all my addictions? Let's list them down. Let's cut them off one by one. I'm addicted to sleeping in. Well, cut it. I'm addicted to sugar. Like look at sugar's in everything now.
And you notice that hard when you try keto diet.
Exactly.
I've hung over for 3 fucking days, and I'm thinking, oh no, it can't be that I was that addicted to sugar. I'm just sick. I just happen to get sick right when I stop eating sugar.
It's that Medusa snake just kind of like, come on, it's not the sugar.
You're doing everything right.
Yeah. And
that word idea. Keep going. Tell me more about that book.
That book is awesome. It's expensive and it's difficult to read. Again, The Language Crystal by Mr. Lyons. I forgot his. I think it's Terrence Lyons.
That's the one I recommended my dad.
Yeah.
Correct?
So on the cover of it, it says the word for what did it say? Ra in Egyptian meant the sun god. Ra in Hebrew means the devil. So you have the dichotomy, and then obviously there's a whole 500-page book explaining the two concepts, right?
So this, again, we watched a brief clip of Lord of the Rings and how prominent a role fire and light plays in not just that story, but again, all stories, even religions, mythology, and things like I have a number of names for the sun. We have names for the sun that invert the meaning of the sun. Is it that well, I think this is too simplistic, and it's even a stupid question to ask, but are people worshiping the sun, the whatever that is out in space, or have they used that as a stand-in, or is it because, well, why the sun, why astronomy and things like this? Why are we looking up to say that's the thing we're going to derive all of these characters from? We're going to embody this source in all of these different things, and we're going to tell stories about it. Why?
That's a really difficult question. There's a lot to unpack there. First of all, without the sun, you're done, right? Everything's done. But Arabs have a really good saying that says, with too much sun, you get a desert, right? So, Thanos, there's balance. There needs to be balance everywhere. And I think this dance of balance is manifested in the world today, right? So, too little sun, you get the poles, ice and nothing. And then too much sun, you get the deserts. Somewhere in between, you get sequoias.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You get beautiful stuff, and that's all interweaved and dance and stuff like that. I'm not an expert in it, and I've been just diving deep into classical mythology and Romans, Greeks, Buddhist, and everywhere I just find the thread, which is this thread of, call it two forces, two fires, in a sense duality, but I find the need to go past duality, that all these stories, that's what they're representing.
In which direction? So I'll clarify it if you don't already know what I mean.
Go ahead.
This is something I've been talking with Stephen quite a bit about. Dualism. Does that imply two that are separate and distinct, or am I breaking the one into two? When you say you want to go past the dual, are you going to the tripartite? Are you going to quadrigeminy? Are you going to how far and in which direction? Are you looking for the one ring, or is everything polar? Is it not good and evil, but a scale with infinite good on one side and infinite bad on the other side? And I know these are ridiculous, hard questions to answer, man, but like I'm interested in this stuff, and Stephen's raised that objection a lot about like pantheism, and if we're going to take one, how do we break these things apart, and are we breaking just one thing into pieces so we can understand it, or are we making the claim that these things are distinct? Are they all? I don't even really know how to ask the question I'm asking, but tell me about dualism and what you mean when you say you want to get past that idea.
Everything that I've read from Eastern philosophy, which is Taoism, Buddhism, Hinduism, to Nietzsche, beyond good and evil, to the Romans, it seems to me that this dualism is something that's artificial and something that has been pressed upon us by something else that I can't name precisely. In the sense that, I think it's been the problem since the beginning of time, and that's always addressed. It's addressed by the Buddha, it's addressed by the Iliad, it's addressed by the Odyssey, by the Gita. That's why I brought him, and by the Romans, in a sense. What I find funny is that the weapons that the old gods used to have, for example, Hades used to have, I don't even know what it's called. It's like a trident, but with only two, horns, right? And then Neptune had a trident, and Zeus has the thunder, right? So the Egyptians used to say that the Greeks were children because they had separated Zeus and Hera and then there was Neptune, and I don't know his consort right now. It escapes my mind, but so the lord of the telluric, in a sense, telluric meaning everything that's from earth,
Yeah.
and then the lord of the heavens, right? And now the moment we've made this division is the moment we have to pick sides, but there's no sides because Zeus is the All-Father.
Yeah,
You
and
see what I'm saying?
that means there's no prospect of me accessing that. I'm of the earth. I have to split myself into the spiritual version of Ben and the physical version of Ben to be able to access that thing. And I think I know what you're talking about. Those stories, your children, you're telling children's stories. Your myths are too young. In an insulting way, but
Right.
let me show.
Exactly.
Let me. Here's how these things are. It's all logos.
Yeah.
It's all the word. It's all virtues. Everything is part of this one thing.
Right.
And you can't. So that's another contention, I guess, for this pantheism. Why break that thing into these characters? Is that why are we doing this artificial thing to the real? Is that just to make it so that we can access it? Like, I can tell a story if I break this one thing into characters.
Yeah. To me, the way I see it, these old religions, you have like some psychic forces. The Greeks used to believe that you're just basically a thing made out of clay, and you're the playthings of the gods because you have all these addictions, right? So Persephone was the embodiment of sensuality, of lust, of all these things. So when a Greek will like run around on his wife, or like just rape some maiden somewhere, you say, hey, like Persephone just possessed me, and I went to do this. It wasn't myself that did it. I couldn't help myself. The gods came and acted something out that they wanted, right? With the advent of Christianity, of all these things, then that was completely lost, and you were just sinful, right? So now you have to repent, and like we were talking earlier, the repenting and the sinfulness came from the sense of guilt that you got from the gods. Before, beyond good and evil kind of thing. It's not that wasn't bad. It was bad, but now you're gonna get it. You know what I mean? You're not gonna. The result of your actions are going to.
So it's not just that I can do whatever I want and say that it was a spirit that possessed me.
It's not escapism, right?
And I can't just right. I'm not skating on the consequences of this. So in that let's say, to continue with this example of Persephone, the seduction, grabbing me. Where does the recompense come from? How am I punished for that?
There's great mythological stories about this. I forgot the name right now, but there's a guy who sees Persephone and sneaks out and tries to catch a glimpse of her, and when he sees her, the goddess sees him, and he realized that he messed up, so he starts running, and then all the Persephone turns all of her little minions into rabid dogs. They're gonna chase him down and eat him in the end, and there's a price to pay always for everything, for your insults and for your weakness everywhere, right? And I think that's what I really, the classical history calls to me, because all of these people had to figure it out, in the sense they had to erase weakness from themselves.
Is there a distinction between knowingly, I know I shouldn't go and try and gaze upon Persephone, and I do it anyway, versus by mistake? I round the corner and there's a woman who's not my wife, and are there variations in sin, or is there a sin category and a good category?
I think it wasn't it Jesus that said that if your eye leads you to another woman, you gotta pluck your eye out. I think it's in the
that
Bible
doesn't
somewhere.
sound like the forgiving, kind,
No.
generous God that I know.
No.
Not my Christians.
He also said that he's gonna bring the sword. So
He wasn't fucking around, and
No.
like I'm woefully ill-informed about many of the things that I talk about. Religion's no exception, but it doesn't seem like the old God, the old gods, are anything like what we perceive them to be. Like you said about Buddhism,
yeah.
right? That's not a be good to everyone and make sure that there's equality sort of idea, but we've twisted it into this, just like that inversion in those movies. We've twisted it into this thing that allows us to just get away with whatever we want.
Yeah.
And I think when we don't see those consequences in real time, we keep doing it. And so is that what materialism is? I'm constantly bombarding you with distractions from, oh man, I have been really fucking up.
From self-mastery. Distractions from self-mastery. And really, like the book that I have, The Doctrine of Awakening, the attainment of self-mastery according to the earliest Buddhist text. Mm-hmm. Everything here distracts you from mastering yourself. If you choose to do it, then you're biting the apple. You see what I'm saying? And Buddhism, in its earliest version, was just a set of principles that freed you from ever going to try the apple again.
Mm-hmm. That self-mastery idea, the first thing that comes to mind, and even when we were talking about Buddhism earlier, is selfishness. It's self-focused. This is the rational self-interest, or the objectivism of Ayn Rand. But that type of selfishness, it's not greed. I'm not trying to accumulate. I don't want all the microphones. I don't want all the money. I am focused on mastering the thing that I am. It's the most selfish and the most selfless thing I can do, by detaching myself from as much bullshit as I can.
Exactly. And at the same time, you can fall into the vice of having no vices.
What do you mean?
Well, now I'm enjoying the fact that I can cut away or like loosen up all these chains. Mm-hmm. So now that in itself has become a vice, which is also talked to in Buddhism, and how to get rid of that. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of levels of ascensions. There's a lot of enlightenment. There's a lot of enlightenments. There's a lot of aha moments. You know what I mean? Like that aha moment that you had with coffee. First you just drink it, you don't think anything about it. Now you're like, well, let's get rid of it. Now I have headaches. It takes me 3 weeks to get rid of headaches. I don't sleep well. Like, is this the power that coffee had over me that I didn't realize?
Yeah.
My wife's just got on keto. Like you walk by a cookie and you're like, oh man, I just want it.
For me, it was sandwiches.
I
just wanted to bite into bread.
Yeah.
And it was like, I know enough about biology to know that it's not just I'm imagining the feeling of biting into a sandwich or the taste or anything. My gut bacteria have trained me to want that fucking sandwich.
Exactly.
I'm like, well, how am I letting this thing, this tiny, insignificant organism that occupies my bowels, control my consciousness?
So what else controls you? Do you know? You know what I mean? That's the what controls me all the time. And I think eventually you go up this, and eventually you have a crisis, a kind of crisis of an ego crisis. Yeah, exactly. So that's the ascetic path, the warrior path, and like we were talking in the book, it says that asceticism has been twisted in Western society to mean suffering and to think that you're a monk not doing anything. But back in the day, think of Miyamoto Musashi. He was an ascetic. He was the greatest swordsman that ever lived. Think of Diogenes. You know, Alexander the Great went to talk to him, and he lived in a barrel. You know, so I have a deep fascination for this classical culture, and these things keep popping up nonstop. In my view, I can't even watch Hollywood movies anymore.
Yeah.
So
Have you? No doubt you've considered, and I've noticed this in myself, that a lot of this warrior ethos, warrior mindset stuff, is it just that I'm confirming myself? Like, because these things appeal to me, and I'm at the top of the hierarchy. Like you said, that the job we did is not for everyone. Pushing yourself to be the best person on the basketball court, that's something that's built into you. And are you seeing, what's a simpler way to say this? I read books really well. So reading books is virtuous. I am virtuous. Warrior ethos sounds good to me. It's appealing. It hits that chord, right? And I also do this. So that's the thing. This is the one path.
you watch Game of Thrones, right? You know the point where Sam Tarly is like reading a bunch of books, and finally he's like, I'm done. This is over. I'm done reading about the stories of great people and their heroic things that they've done. I'm gonna go to the north, and I'm gonna go face the Dark Knight or the Night King, right? But I still have the knowledge of the books. I have the knowledge to say that now, Jon is actually a Targaryen and all these things. So that's what that brings, in a sense. Reinforcing your own self is another addiction, in a sense. So you want to be careful. And I've fallen into that trap in the sense that I've gone all the way to the right and saying like, hey, my way is the only way. This is, you gotta just keep going and all these things. And Bruce Lee comes to mind. No, you just gotta be like water. And in the classical world, Mercury, Hermes, his metal is Mercury, which is also the hardest metal and the softest metal. It's oscillating, so it can go anywhere, it can do anything, and at the same time is hard. So to me, again, like this symbolism and this imagery allows me to visualize it, and then to, okay, like how could I be like this in this situation or in this situation? And I think that's what the ancients were talking about when they were talking about like, oh, Hermes came to me,
The balance.
The balance.
I struck the balance.
Right. Yeah. And Hermes comes, he's the slayer of giants, like Thor, for example, and then he comes to the aid of Priam when he goes to see Achilles. He's the one that sneaks Priam inside the tent, like in Troy in the movie. But that's an inversion. Troy is like a big inversion, but and then also helps Odysseus and all these things. So to talk about, you've seen Troy, the movie?
Sometime
like
ago.
Long
I
ago?
know the story generally, in fragments.
All right, so you've read the Iliad, right? The one that I sent you. So you can see the difference between Achilles, the righteous, and the great, and the guy that he just wants to do things right, and the Achilles that's in Troy. The Achilles that in Troy is just a pompous asshole,
just arrogant.
and then Hector is the family man that is all that is man, basically. Has son, is he's virility.
The real Paternus.
And he's the guy that gets fucking destroyed by Achilles, who then gets killed by Paris, who's the feminine weakling.
Right.
You see. But the original story is not like that at all.
So is this just mind control? Like, is that just to make people sleep, or more docile, more easily? Because it's inarguable, I think, that input and output. Like what I'm putting into your mind or what I'm putting into my own mind is affecting you. So if I'm continually showing you inversions of the good or inversions of the bad, I'm portraying someone who is engaging in villainous behavior as the good guy. Like you relate to the villain. Is that intentional?
I think that's a question that each person has to ask himself, you know, and it's a tough question. If you decide it is, okay, just examine it. You know what I mean? Like, what's this movie really trying to say? You know.
You mentioned Sam. I'm done reading these books. I'm going on the hero's journey now. Having been to war, and I understand this is an idea far older than me having this idea. You've conquered the enemy, the other. Like when you've engaged in warfare, let's say, it's a transformative experience. And so now I don't imagine that there are many fry cooks focused on self-mastery. I don't imagine that there are many school teachers focused on self-mastery. But it seems to be overwhelmingly common among warriors and the warrior caste. Is it because I know what the other is capable of, and I know what I'm capable of in facing the other. The next enemy, the next threat, or whatever is within me. That's the most dangerous game, is that shadow of me. Does that resonate with you at all? Because I feel like post-war, like I'm past a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, war is the great purifier, right? Mm-hmm. And it makes you just take everything away and focuses you on not dying, right? Yeah. So you have to have the will to do everything that's necessary to be face to face with the enemy and kill him. So that in itself is that in itself has been a spiritual journey since the beginning of man. And the virility that you need to have, virility not in the sense of I'm going to have many kids, but the virility in the sense of virtues that you need to have to be at that point is, I think, inborn in warriors, in people that seek this, right? Our society nowadays doesn't have any initiation rites for men. So men that feel like they want to be men seek their own initiation. Yeah. And in our case was Indok, right? And then that was our coming into adulthood, and then war itself was our coming into self-mastery, into a higher state of being, in a sense.
Yeah, that's the next portion after the initiation.
Correct. And then, there's people that get addicted to this, and there's people that, like you see contractors going on and just constantly going to war, constantly testing themselves. And obviously that's not gonna end good, because that is a step into your hero's journey. You've gone to war, you've put at least in my journey, I've gone to war, I've put my life on the line. I know I'm not a coward. I know that if the time comes, I'm gonna do what needs to be done. So how can I transmute this into all the facets of my life? And that's why you see, for example, Miyamoto Musashi, the greatest swordsman that ever lived, had 72 or 62
probably 72 as a recurring number.
Yeah, fights, but like one-on-one fights, just him and the sword against another guy, him and the sword. And towards the, in his 30s, he just became a painter, an architect. He created things out of learning the way after he decided he didn't want to be a warrior anymore, transmuted into creation. And this creation was, he created gardens, art, virtus again. So I think in my journey and in rekindling this fire of virtus is the rekindling of my creativity, the rekindling of my will, like my happiness to live in a sense, because the indoctrination that I've received throughout uh, throughout my journey into the military has made me like a cyclops, like we were talking about earlier, has made me very one-pointed and very I don't care about anything else. Yeah, I'm stoic. It means I don't have any feelings. Well, no, I've just erased a range of my being in a sense, because I've sacrificed that range in order to gain here. Like, okay, like I can swim 10K under, like, in cold as water, and it doesn't bother me.
Sure.
Cool. But now I've set like the ability to come back and be normal and still have that emotional range that I need to, for example, deal with my grandfather recently passed away, so deal with my mother in that emotional range.
Yeah.
Like those are things that I have to relearn again.
I can't be Thanos when I also have to be dad.
Exactly. So to be a complete human being is, to me, learning the edges and keep expanding into the unknown in a sense, kind of like Jordan Peterson says, obviously, and the mark of a man, of a hero, is to always be at that edge. That's my view.
Sure. That's so, in my mind, I thought of that. I thought you were talking toward that mercurial idea.
Correct.
I understand pushing my left and right boundaries as far as I can. I can engage in violence this far. I can engage in pacifism this far. I don't understand what you mean about my duty to stay at the edge, because what I see as the optimum is, again,
Is the middle.
Yeah, I'm the liquid metal between the. I know what my capabilities are out there, but this is where I want to.
How do you know where the middle is if you don't know where the edges of this thing is?
You don't. So what are you doing? Just picking an edge? I'm going to go as hard to violence and conquest as I can, or I'm going to reclude. I'm going to close myself off in a room so that I don't even step on any ants.
Mm. The way I look at things, for example, in like the Tao or whatever, it's not a violence versus pacifism thing. It is what can move me, the amount of excitement that it takes to move me, in a sense. You see, like, for example, the guys that do close proximity flying, right? You have to have a certain amount of coolness in yourself in order to be able to move at that extreme, right? So my ability to be centered at an extreme is what I'm looking for.
I understand.
Yeah.
I'm continually trying to expand my range. Optimally, I'm centered way out here.
Right. So in a stressful situation, I'm centered. For example, I had a stressful situation my last deployment where I was sleeping. I was completely asleep, and an IED went off about 30 feet behind my head. A guy went to pee and stepped onto this IED, so we had to take care of him, right? I was the medic. Let's take care of him. So, explosion, pieces of this guy fall on me. All right, let's go. What's happening? I was shaking, and I was doing stuff because I can't stop my body from experiencing the adrenaline that's coursing through my veins. But I was clear-minded in the sense, and that comes from a lot of training, that comes from self-mastery, and that comes from a certain sureness that, hey, this is it. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen. I'm just going to do the best that I can at this moment, right? But you can't have these three things unless you have virtues, I think. Even if you could have a huge fire in the sense of you can go get it all the time, but you come home and you end up down a bottle. You end up, just banging a bunch of girls that the strip club, and you end up never finding your equilibrium, you know.
And so you're not, I can see maybe younger people thinking of this, or it even popped into my mind that being at Redline, like you just described, I'm functioning at Redline. How do I guess it's intuitive again, we talked about this before, I don't need to be fucking different girls all the time. I don't need to be risking my life on meaningless pursuits. It's, again, I'm looking for balance. I can reach this extreme, and in the moment I can be centered at this extreme, but to apply that generally, I don't think makes sense. You return, I need to focus on, I'm preparing myself now again to go to that red
Exactly,
line once
yeah.
more.
And that preparing needs to be devotional. In a sense, it needs to be a rite, like a rite in RITE sense, you know, and it needs to be sacred. So the moment we take that preparing and we take it from like a purely materialistic thing that I'm just going to train because I need to perform a job, to I'm going to train because this is my spiritual activity, I'm going to do it with single-mindedness and with purpose, then warriorship becomes something completely different.
Yeah, I've had people ask me, like, why are you meditating? What for? Do you have like anxiety or something like that? Like, no, the purpose is fully selfish. It's fully selfish. I'm trying to wrestle that bull. I want to be able to restrain my mind, and I probably haven't always gotten it. I get it now. I think the purpose is in the act. I'm not doing it to eliminate symptoms that I'm experiencing.
The act is all there is, regardless of what it is. You see, and I think that's the point of all these books, and that's it. You know, at least in my experience, and that's obviously I only talk anecdotally because it's my experience of this. It's my hero's journey. Yours is different. Everybody else is different. But at the same time, you know, what they say, history doesn't repeat itself, but it sure rhymes. You know, so maybe different things. You know, I've had this experience with the IED. Well, maybe a single mom has an experience with, you know, an abusive husband. That could be her IED and taking care of the children. It's the same. It's just different magnitudes, right? That's my opinion.
Her red line.
Yeah, her red line is right there.
Yeah, I understand. Fire. Repeated in these stories. Representing the sun. Characters representing the sun. Characters using fire. Characters who represent the sun using fire. And that purification of war. Walk through that scene we just watched, Lord of the Rings.
All right.
They're headed to Moria, right? And everyone's shitting their pants because they just heard the sound of something that is unreal.
It's beyond their imagination.
Exactly, it's unreal, and they're only getting the shadow of the glow of this thing down a long corridor, and just an ounce of that light is filling this cavern with light.
All right, so if you haven't seen it, obviously you can YouTube the scene, but it's right when they're going in the cavern. What's interesting to me is Tolkien is amazing. He's one of the best mythopoeic, poetical authors that I've ever encountered, and he knew his stuff, right? What I've seen in Lord of the Rings is a lot of trinities. So you have the Gandalf trinity, right? So you would have Gandalf, you have Sauron, and then you have Sauron, right? Then you have the warrior trinity. That would be the priestly trinity, right? Then you have the warrior trinity, which is I forgot now the name of the king, Aragon. the elf and the dwarf,
Gimli.
right? So the elf and the dwarf are the extremes. Let's make the greatest warrior ever. Well, Legolas, he's the most noble. He's got Khaleesi hair. He can shoot arrows, and
he has vision.
he has vision, right? So, and then let's make the most ignoble. Well, this guy is like a dwarf. He just runs around. He's greedy as fuck, and he's obsessed with that, and he's obsessed about being better than the best guy, right? The same in Dragon Ball Z with Goku and Vegeta, right? So you have that trinity, and then you have the smallest trinity, which would be Frodo, Sam, and Smeagol, right? All those, the Volknot kind of, those are the three trinities and the three things, right? At least that's in my mind. So at the highest trinity, you have Gandalf. At the highest trinity, you have Saruman, but he gets corrupted, right? So now you have Gandalf trying to do something about it. So he's in the cave, and he knows that to do something about it, he has to face his darkest fear. The going down into the cave is symbolic of Gandalf dying, and the gray dying, because now he's not in the middle. The gray is just the middle in between the two, right? So now he goes and he fights his darkness, and he ascends from his darkness, from the cave, later in the second movie, right, where he shows back up as Gandalf the Wife.
Basically embodying light.
Embodying the light.
This blinding light from which the ascendant version of him emerges.
And the most noble warrior recognizes him as soon as possible and bends the knee.
Yeah.
So that's the same as, King Arthur story, or many stories.
Yeah. So that as you're pausing this and explaining it, watching Legolas, immediately recognizes the archetype, and boom, to his knee. While Gimli and
exactly.
What's it? Boromir.
Boromir.
No, it was. They're kind of dumbfounded, looking at him.
No, not Boromir. It was Aragorn, because Boromir died already.
Yeah, all the time.
But
the three.
Those are the three different reactions that you would have to encountering something sacred, right? If you're self-mastery, if you have self-mastery, you recognize it right away, and you bow to it. Because you're a servant to this fire, right?
Yeah.
If you're in the middle, you're like, wait, I thought you died, because you don't really get it. And then if you're the last guy, he just doesn't get it, right? So, but to go back to the cave, I think there's a lot of symbolism in that cave. And when they run, when the parlor first appears, you can see Gandalf kind of centering himself, getting ready for what's coming. And he also says, something akin to, this monster is beyond any of you. Well, yeah, it's beyond any of you, because none of you have lived this thousands of times like I have, right? If
you're not familiar with the story, Gandalf is cyclical, like the wizard energy, or whatever you want to call it. That character is not simply a person. It's the spirit of something that is cycling.
Is the manifestation of that spirit.
Yeah.
Right? The embodiment of that thing.
So he knows you guys can't do this.
Exactly. So now he faces it. And I think it's really important to say, what does he say when he faces it? He says, I am the servant of the fire, the sacred fire. Well, okay, now I was like, what's Tolkien trying to say here? What's sacred fire? Let's dive deep into this. Okay, Roman honor. The title is Roman honor, the fire in the bones.
Purification.
The purification.
They're being confronted by a fire creature from the depths.
Exactly.
And all these mythologies are pointing to the sun. That's the source. So is it both destruction and rebirth, like sort of all in one scene?
Yeah, and it's not only in old pagan myths, it's in the Bible as well. You know, there's tons of references as God as being fire and being light.
The revelation.
The
as the
revelation,
bush.
exactly. So this is a continuous motive throughout human consciousness. You know, interestingly enough, in Buddhism, this fire is considered bad, in a sense that, well, not this fire, but the Balrog. So Buddhism equates the Balrog with the fire of desire. So desire for anything is that negative fire.
It makes sense instantly in that character. Why is he there? Why is he coming to fuck these guys up? Couldn't he just hang in his hole? What's his motive? There is no motive. He is out of control fire.
And that's the out of control fire will be Ares in ancient Greece, because he's just out of control, he's unreasonable, he is just the personification. He's all my worst traits. Exactly. So now, okay, like Mars is on the battlefield. Well, what's the opposite of Mars? It's Athena. Athena being a woman who represents wisdom and who is cloaked in armor because of the need of wisdom to protect itself from Mars. See, and that these are all things that I'm slowly trying to understand. I'm not an expert in anything. I just like to read about it, and I like to kind of, it's almost fixing my psyche in a way.
Yeah, I see that Athena character, and I think I mentioned this when we were talking before. Wisdom, the priestly class or caste, the armor, that's the warrior caste. Is there any aspect of her that represents the slave class or the working class?
I haven't.
Does she have vices?
No, she was born out of Zeus's forehead. She's the
right from the pineal gland.
Right, exactly. So that's another interesting story, you know. Yeah, I'll have to like get back with that because I haven't really looked into that. But Athena is the goddess, you know, of Athens, obviously. So she's the goddess of democracy. She's the goddess of like the people, in a sense too. So like government would be, she's the goddess of government as well. So I think in a sense that would be what the wisdom for the people would be.
And government should be the mediator, sort of, there, rather than they're not the priestly, ethereal, ascending class or whatever. They're not the war class, and they're not the slave class. It's like an offshoot that has oversight of all three of these things. But we, in the West at least, we make the distinction between the priestly class. Like we have two governing structures, effectively. We have a caste with like an extra head growing off of it. Sucking energy out of it.
Well, like a serpent head.
Yeah.
I really like Evola, and in Evola he talks about how classical, for example, Spartan society used to be set up with, they had two kings. One was the bad, like one was Leonidas, and then they had a king that basically took care of the home. So it was like the feminine king. They have the war king, and then they have the king that manages Sparta. And then they had 28 elders, which were veteran warriors, all, you know, beyond their years, beyond their fighting years, but still with lots of accumulated wisdom. And that's how they made decisions in Sparta, you know. And
insulated wisdom.
Exactly. So that would be considered, and those elderly warriors, they had become priests. They are a sort of priestly class, right? So Evola says that would be the highest way to run a society. And then if you fall from there, because now we're going to wage war, but we're going to wage a righteous war that's sanctioned by everyone and by the gods themselves, right? Or we're going to, now if we fall, into just the warrior class without the spirituality. We have, let's just have war to fuck shit up.
Mm-hmm. And so that's in that story too, as well.
Right.
I'm just thinking of the 300 film. It was a no-go on the war.
Exactly.
They gave, no, the signs aren't right, or whatever the fuck isn't right. Give us our gold for your prophecy. Do you? And then they decide to go to war anyway. And what happens? The fall.
Exactly. And the nice thing about that is that you think of it in the signs weren't right. Yeah, the signs weren't right for all of Greece because they needed the gates to rise the fire out of all the Grecians.
Mm-hmm.
See, so that was like what Leonidas becoming a hero is what sparked the fire in all of Greece to unite and go kick Xerxes' ass. So, yeah, the signs weren't right for all of the Spartans to go because they wasn't smart.
Mm-hmm.
So it's still how they portrayed it in 300, obviously being a comic book with all these things, it's dumb.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality of it was that.
Yeah. It's crazy to me, and it's probably beyond my comprehension for a reason, how in tuned with everything people used to be. And this sort of brings us back to the beginning of what you were talking about, materialism. We're so focused on, and I myself am so focused on it. Well, what use does this have if I can't measure it? If I can't I can't say this is exactly what Tolkien meant, and I can prove it with math or with some sort of reasoning ability. We want everything to be tangible, and that's cutting off probably the greater part of the human experience. If I'm only focused on this, I can touch and taste and feel the heat of this tea, I can smell it. Okay, that's 5 points of data that I'm taking in that tell me that this thing is real. There's so much beyond what we're perceiving, and it seems like, and this is just intuition, these stories and myths and religions are screaming. This isn't it. This narrow band of information you're receiving isn't it. In fact, it's crumbs.
Yeah.
It's film on the basement of this castle that is reality. Something really drastic would be required to break us of that. That, oh man, I need a fucking cell phone. I better wash my cars, because what if somebody sees me in a dirty car? I need a bigger house because it's expected of me. I can't go into a store barefoot. What will people think? All of this physical, base, material shit is constantly impeding our view of what we're in right now. What do you think we're in? Another big question, man. I know.
I think we're in a good story, I guess. I hope that I lived my life the way I lived it, and I've experienced my trials and tribulations, They're my personal ones, and somebody had it much more difficult than me and somebody had it much easier than me, but I think to me, and this is in the Gita as well, I think my whole life revolves around how well I can live it and around how well I can die it, in the sense of, it's have no regrets. Well, okay, what does that exactly mean? I really wanted to sleep with this girl, and no regrets, I'm gonna go do it. Well, I don't think that is at all what live without regrets means. I want to view myself in the light of I've been as noble and as there's a really good quote by Alexander the Great, which is, let us conduct ourselves so that all men wish to be our friends and all fear to be our enemies.
And the way we're doing that, like the way we're, it has to be intuited. It has to be intuited. I can't, like, overused phrase, I can't derive an ought from it is. It has to be intuited. I can't use data to determine how I'm going to embody that thing you're describing. I have to feel it. I have to observe it. And how do I observe it? I create characters. And I have those characters go at one another and push each other to their limits. And I see how that thing pans out. And these authors, Tolkien, George R.R. Martin, they have a knack for saying, here's the characters, it's intuitive. Here's the story, it's intuitive. And everything lines up. It's not, you don't look at Gandalf, for example, and say, no, that's not what Gandalf would do. That's not what
exactly,
Gandalf would do. It's an archetype, and it rings true every single time. These authors nail it. So I can't depend on a priest to tell me where center is. I can't depend on Buddhism to do it. I can't depend on any of those things. Is story religion? Is that how we decide which thing is closest to the, I don't even know, what's closest in approximating the eye here? Because religion doesn't seem to cut it. Obviously materialism doesn't do it. The government can't tell you how to live. Your friends can't tell you how to live. You're depending on interactions with other people. And so 100% intuitive, and as you said, it's 100% subjective. Is it? Or is there a standard?
I mean, there obviously has to be a standard, because if there's no standard, then we end up with what we have now, you know. But I think the standard is self-imposed, and the wanting to break from the telluric, from the profane, from things that attack your noble spirit, in a sense, wanting to get away from these and identifying them and saying no to them is the fire in itself. You know, in the Iliad and in the Odyssey, before they start, Homer praises the muses and says, please let me create this work of art that will, you know, ring for generations. And in a sense, I think that the muses sung to Tolkien and sung to Martin in order to create this. And creation itself is beyond intellect, because, you know, you always mention, you know, measuring stuff and all these things, but intellect doesn't create anything. It only takes stuff apart, you know. It analyzes stuff, it takes it apart, and then it's like a Borg, you know. It like puts stuff back together with somehow else.
The archonic mind.
Exactly. So you have to go past intellect in that sense to create something beautiful and to create something that is harmonious, and resonates with the masses, so that's, you know.
That maybe clarifies the idea of from the Most High versus base observation. I'm observing material reality. I'm constructing things out of the component pieces of material reality, but I'm starting at the wrong end, sort of. The thing closest to that ideal has to be intuitive.
And that's exactly why I like, you know, you could look at the sciences back in, you know, Pythagoras' day. He started from the top, not from the bottom. So, you know, you look at you know, the elements and like all the interesting math stuff that he did, and with the resonance and all these things. I think they had it right, and somehow we lost it somewhere. You know what I mean? The Dark Ages, or whatever you want to call it.
Maybe it was just easier to understand.
Because they were more in nature and more connected to everything.
Here's the gender of this element.
Yeah,
And I'm making a story out of science so that it's intuitive. And we're going further and further and further and further into that. I'm at the subatomic now. I'm at the glue that's holding things together. But that doesn't give us anything other than
more stuff.
microphones and high-speed cameras and like all this. Oh, that live stream ended. Whoops. That it's just giving us more stuff that's distracting us. Whereas if it seems like alchemy was more valuable than chemistry, unless I'm thinking in terms of, well, my satellites and my automobile.
Yeah, it's my belief that, you know, you look at ancient civilizations, you look at the Egyptians, you look at the Greeks, you know, they built everything in ratios. They have phi everywhere. Everything is aligned. They to me, they figured it out. Yeah. They made everything out of stone, so they didn't use vegetation. They didn't use wood and stuff. You know, they used stones. You look at the Aztecs and the Peruvians, the Incas. They had something that we lost, and you know, you can probably spend your whole lifetime looking at what exactly that is. But it seems to me that the whole world is screaming at you that, hey, this is what it is.
Here's the thing.
Here's the thing.
And you recognize it. You recognize it in painting. You recognize it in music.
Right.
You recognize it in the tone of someone's voice. That baffles me. And like you said, that's a lifetime of research to figure out why. Is it because I'm a product of the environment that I recognize that phi ratio intuitively? Or is that phi ratio somehow the code? Is that the substance from which everything is made of? Does it operate according to that rule?
Yeah.
Was I created, and I'm oriented in such a way that I detect that in everything? It baffles me.
It baffles me that, for example, in all these pagan myths, electricity or the highest god is always the god that wields lightning, right? And these guys didn't know that your heart and your nervous system and everything that basically is you runs on lightning, right? But it does. They intuited this, right? In the Scandinavian myths, Thor is the god of lightning, right? It turns out that doing research, that Odin is an Indo-European addition to the pantheon of Nordic deities, which kind of usurped Thor as the king of the pantheon. And this was from an injection of Christianity into the north, and Odin being the Gandalf, the mediator between the Norse pantheon and Christianity. So, you know, he hangs on a tree, he sacrifices himself to himself, all these things. And where I was going with that is that I don't know, have we lost it? Was the back way, the right way? Was, you know, has Christianity taken something away from us? I don't think it's Christianity itself that has done it, but I think it's that mentality from the desert that is not balanced because there's too much sun. So you come from, you know, what's the product of too much sun is gonna be a religion that has too much God. It's not balanced. God is in everything, everywhere, and you are just bending your knee to it and suffering because it's just blaring down on you. This is what I've come to look, you know, and I think you can see that how he stemmed out of there and he kind of like took everything over. If you look at, let's say, African cults, where in the equatorial cults, right, they're all motherly cults. They're all nature provides for you. There is at top of the hierarchy, there's a benevolent mothering spirit that gives you everything. Well, of course, you live in the freaking Amazon forest. There's everything there, you know?
I'm endlessly provided for. And that's you've constructed a particular type of person and a particular consciousness of that people as a result of that. So even the myths reflect it. Individual behavior reflects
Exactly. So, what are the myths that have built civilizations? Are like electricity, sun, like
the unforgiving, the father, sort of.
So
Everything is patriarchy.
But not in like a demeaning sense, but in like the Jon Snow versus and Khaleesi meaning, you know, and the dragon kind of like, well, it looks like Jon Snow is the boss, you know, so, and that's exactly where they're going with that thing, you know, if they're gonna go the right way.
It's not going to be 4 or 5 women all putting their rings together and then
exactly. I mean, there's even in this kind of topsy-turvy world, let's say that I have feminized myself and I don't want to be the guy that's at the edge fighting the lion. I'm going to send the women to do it. Well, okay, send the women to do it. Let's say that they all die. Now our whole race has died. Everything's done because they make the babies. You know what I mean? That is just completely insane. Back again in Greece, you know, you had the Amazons. And back to the language crystal, Amazon, A, without, Mazon, which was breast. So they were without breast because they cut their breast off so they could draw the bow correctly and shoot accurately because their bodies were made for that.
And I don't have formula at this time.
Exactly.
I can just replace the mother.
Exactly. So in ancient Greece, Amazons were a caricature of a warrior because one, they always only used bows because they were female, so they could never meet a man face to face. And two, they renounced their femininity to be a caricature of kind of a shady warrior.
Yeah. Do you think, you mentioned this earlier, it's sort of a fusion of these ideas. The initiation rite, does that need to be sex specific?
It's always been.
Sure.
From the beginning of time.
And do you see that as, is there a better solution to offer than that? Because I agree that initiation rite is something that, my experience again, it benefited me. And in my observation of others, a sort of transformative initiatory experience changes people for the better, more often than not. You have exceptions to any rule. To avoid having this perverse version of femininity, we're always casting the wicked stepmother as the female, or we're just going full sexual market value focus. This woman is just ass and titties. And we're doing the same thing with the father. I have this tyrant. I have this Donald Trump. That's the masculine. Or it's another perversion of that masculine. Instead of what's true, what is virtus? Again, what's the thing that rings true with you when you think properly oriented masculinity, properly oriented femininity? And then those two things together is, well, it's that's resonance. That's what resonates with people. That's why these stories are so powerful. Can an initiation thing fix people? And if society is people, society's all fucked up, government's all fucked up, everything's all fucked up, the whole world's a mess. Okay, who did that? You did it. Fixing people is the way we fix all that stuff. It's not carbon taxing and cleaning up the environment. Yeah, that stuff comes, but we're bailing out a boat without fixing the holes that are in it. Can that initiation thing start repairing our collective consciousness?
I'm really wary of trying to fix people because I was in that phase not too long ago and it just doesn't work. where people are is where they are, and there's no fixing them unless they fix themselves.
Yeah.
You can kind of, take a horse to the water, but you can make him drink, kind of thing. If you have an interest, or if you have a very traumatic episode, it seems that traumatic episodes kind of either take you completely off the reservation, or they put you like right in the middle of the reservation, try to figure yourself out, so this never happens to you again. Right? What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to gain as much knowledge as I can and act the way, manifest my mind in this world. The way I speak, the way I look, the way I talk, all these things are a manifestation of me, of how I am. So if I want to, I can speak of noble and good stuff and be like a fat fuck eating, McDonald's all the time. I can't be like Jabba and talk.
Shout out McDonald's.
Yeah, and talk to you about, the greatness of warriorship, right? So in this act, I hope that other people notice it and either want to do this, want to talk to me, or want to be like me in a sense, right?
Or be like what you're trying to
exactly, and not like me, but what I'm trying to represent.
Sure, I understand it. An embodiment.
And that's what I've noticed by just kind of delving into these things and even delving into Christianity. Jesus, that's exactly what he did, in a sense, and in my eyes. So, he was basically saying, hey, these guys, they're just selling garbage. That's not the truth. The truth is this, and here I'm going to manifest it. I'll show you. You know what I mean? And you have a guy who's surrounded by a bunch of, he's got his disciples, but he knows they're cowards. So it's like, you're going to betray me, man. I already know this. It's like, it's obvious, right? So it's okay, because I'm still going to be in the right mindset. It's okay.
Gandalf knows what's coming.
Exactly. So this story just repeats itself, and repeats in, I don't know, in Game of Thrones it repeats itself, in Harry Potter is a really good one,
So if I want to apply this practically, I agree with everything you said. What direction would you send people in discovering what their archetype is? You know what I mean?
Yeah. For me, it was the Iliad, right? But first you have to have curiosity. You have to say, okay, like what? It's if you don't have an archetype, you just fall into something. And if you fall into something, you'll basically be like Loki, right? He's like all over the place. He's just trying to, weasel himself out of stuff. Or I don't like this, I don't like that. If you don't have any opinion, then you're nothing, right? So if you just sit down and say, like, what do I stand for? What are my values? What are my virtues? What do I want to show to my kids? Like, that's all part of like the Jordan Peterson little self-authoring thing, right? You can do that. You can self-author yourself, or you can just kind of go through your life and say, okay, like, I'm at this point. What do I want to be when I grow up, in a sense, right? And then you just try to exemplify that with everything that you do. I like Jocko, for example. Jocko Willink is really good in the discipline, the like, the go get it. It's raining, it's cold, good. It's like he's got them discipline. He's got the virtues without all the mysticism or without all the crap. But also he's been to war. He's seen friends die. Like, his mysticism is his practical experience. So if you don't have that, use something that's similar, like use whatever traumatic event or whatever thing that moves you to become greater than you. Like Odin sacrifices himself on a tree for his higher self. He sacrifices his lower self for his higher self. So to me, throughout the day, as a devotional, it's always the same thing. Okay, like I want to eat this cookie, or like I want to do something, or like no, like I'm gonna sacrifice this cookie, and that it gives you empowerment. You're like, oh, I've beaten this little devil, I can go and get a bigger dragon, you know. And the dragons get bigger and bigger and bigger, to the point where, you know, if you're fighting huge dragons, at least you know you're got there and you're a worthy hero, right? If you're fighting the Barlog, that means you're freaking Gandalf, you know.
How did I get here?
How did I get here? You're not trying to squish like a cockroach underneath your kitchen, you know. You're fighting the Balrog.
So it should be universally applicable. And I think we discussed this briefly earlier, like the guy who's sweeping the floors and the guy who's devoting his life to understanding the phi ratio in reality. Both of these people can exist in hell or in heaven, and it's your deferral of that cookie, that sacrifice to the higher conception of you, or God, or the archetype, or the hero, or whatever thing you're aspiring to. It's like the phoenix. Yeah. Universally accessible. You don't have to be a warrior.
And that's the beautiful thing about it. You don't have to even have intellect in a sense. You know what I mean? You don't have to be the brightest guy to figure this out. You don't have to do anything. You can be like a retard and still be good.
Is conscience the thing that's guiding that? Because the cookie is an easy example, but is it built into us to know right and wrong? Which of these actions should I engage in if I'm faced with a choice or a number of choices? That's just intuition.
I don't know. I had a really good quote by some Buddhist monk, and he said, you know, no matter what you do, you can't live in the same room as a rabid dog. So, is it right to kill that dog? He's rabid. You know what I mean? Is it so you can live in peace? You know, like, is killing right? Is killing wrong? Is, you know, what Muslims are doing right or wrong? It's what they believe is right. Are they a rabid dog?
And that's the biggest thing that lingers in my mind, is if all of this stuff is subjectively focused, if it's focused on intuition, I know the right standard, and just as you said, it doesn't matter how I get into that truth.
If, for example, like you watch all these myths and you watch Jon Snow and Khaleesi. When Khaleesi burnt the Tarleys, right? Was that right for her to do, or was it wrong? Would have Jon Snow done the same? Even Tarly says, no, you wouldn't have, you know, because you're righteous. Is killing righteous? Killing when, you know, they refuse to bend the knee. Well, maybe they would have come around, but is somebody who's a rabid extremist ever going to come around? Are you going to spend all your energy into making him come around when there's other rabid extremists that are attacking you? You know, now you're fighting, like, even with this and like waking up, enlightenment, spiritual war stuff. I say, like, I always like to be at the edge of stuff. So now a lot of people are like, why don't you talk about this, or why don't you teach other people and stuff like this? Well, I'm at the edge. I hold the shield. let's visualize it. I'm at the edge. I'm holding the shield, and I'm discovering these things. I'm fighting my inner demons and stuff. If I don't have the energy to turn around.
I can't face both ways.
And pick somebody up that's, way back.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're right next to me, like I feel like in this case you are next to me. If you like put your knee down, I'll grab you and I'll put you back into the shield wall in a sense. But I don't have time to turn around. It's not possible. Yeah. So I don't feel like I am some kind of beacon of enlightenment or anything like that. So I'm still fighting my own war. How can I, who have not finished fighting, tell you how to live your life? That's.
Does that thing? So anyone telling you what to do is full of shit.
That's my personal opinion. That.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because I can't face in both directions, and if this thing is an endless pursuit of self-mastery, I can't be engaged with both hands fighting that dragon or whatever and proselytizing for how I got to this point. And I think you used an illustration earlier, again with that same clip. Gandalf goes down to get up. Saruman goes from where he is toward the Most High. He wants to be alongside Sauron, his emissary, the emissary of evil. Sauron sort of represents power from both ways. Gandalf is going this direction to get to that power and destroy it. And Saruman is always going to be in an antagonistic relationship with that power, even though he's trying to get to it. That the wings burning.
Yeah.
That example. So just in this story, I can see obviously that there is a right path to the end goal and a wrong path to the end goal. So if my goal is to live in peace, I have to first decide that's the right goal. And then if my goal is to live in peace, I have to kill that dog. And I can't now say that killing is wrong. Is it wrong?
Now we've gotten all the way to like modern society and like everything that's happening nowadays, and like not in any type of like extremist or any type of like I don't advocate violence or anything like that. And it's like, but violence has been trusted upon you. You see what I'm saying? Maybe not right now here, but it's coming. I mean, intuitively, I feel that it's coming. The walls, you know what I mean? Look at Europe. Look at what's going on in Europe right now. Me being European, I have been
a spy for several years.
I've been in extreme agony of looking at what's happening and not being able to do anything.
Yeah.
Right? But at the same time, what's happening? The pendulum is swinging. You see all this nationalistic, extremist factions coming up. You look at Hungary, just build a wall around there. They're
Japan's taking no migration.
Exactly.
Taking no migration. People are bailing out of this UN charters, and the EU is on its last leg. Chaos.
Poland hasn't had any terrorist attacks since I don't know when, but a long time. Look at France.
Yeah.
So I don't know. And like you always say, look at the people who run the policies in these countries. They're either effeminate men like Macron, or they're like old hag women who are single and who just profess this kind of like motherly, like let's take everybody in, open the gates, and then.
Or it also could be like the wicked stepmother. It could be motivated by that aspect of the feminine.
Exactly. So all these, even though they're modern and stuff, they still fall under archetypes. You rule a country, you are the pinhead of this country, everything that you represent, and then look what your country has gone to.
Yeah.
And
and Khaleesi keeps seeing things that she just built crumble in real time
Exactly.
Which is trying to rule with what we think of as Buddhism.
Exactly.
Instead of there has to be some exertion there. There has to be order. There has to be some aspect of the masculine there, and not entirely feminine.
And that's why you see with Khaleesi, you see a progression of her masculine side from all the way from the child, which would be her brother. There was just temper tantrums and don't let the dragon out and all this, to the warrior, which is Drogo. Well, how did that end up for you? Not very good, when you started becoming all super proud and and you got tricked by this witch that basically took everything away from you. And you can see the progression to Jon Snow. And you can see, for example, like the half-man Tyrion. You can see, like, during the last part, while he's been advising her, he's done everything wrong. Like, nothing that he does is right. Why? Because you have taken as a hand a half-man. And he's like, well, I fought in the battle here. I've done this, I've done that. Well, you've lost everything. And now there's been this switch. And now Jon is, now they're complete in a sense. And in the last episode, not this battle, but right before the battle, you could see that they try to emphasize all the pairings. So you see Sansa is paired with Theon, because that's kind of like how her masculine is manifested, because she's beat down all the time, and she was a serf, and they castrated her, and they castrated Theon, but they castrated her power as well. You see, so they're all like mirroring each other, and you can see how the tall chick, Lady Brienne, and Jaime, like Tyr, which is the god of war, has lost his arm, but he has discovered nobility and honor through Brienne. You see, so it's like, I don't know, maybe I start seeing these things, but they're pretty self-evident once you like kind of pick up onto the game.
Yeah, and even she's paired with the half-man prior to Jon being introduced to that dynamic. Tyrion's the only counterpart for the role she was playing at that time. She can't have a Jon Snow.
Exactly.
Because she hasn't had her arc.
Exactly. So her arc would be like the battle that just happened. So now she's lost again she's lost her dragon. She's seen the true evil of the Night King. Her dragon couldn't do anything about it. You know what I mean? So again, growth, exponential growth. And now what does she have to do? She has to fight her evil feminine side. So what's the Cersei would be the complete opposite of Khaleesi now. They battle it out. Just like the Mountain is the opposite of Clegane, of the Hound. He's just like the hierarchies, right? You have the hierarchy of Cersei. She's up top, and look at the men that she surrounded herself with. It's that pirate dude, and it's the Mountain, and it's all like just distortions of nobility. And then you can see the same in Khaleesi or Jon Snow, and then Khaleesi, Sansa, and Arya. So now let's battle. Let's make a story out of it.
You mean it's not just about sex and
it's all about
conquest?
Just and incest.
It's funny. I don't know if it's what makes the stories good. It's like you have to add all this stuff to keep people engaged now. Instead, like, I'm showing you the same story that everyone has already told you, and that you already know it. You knew the story the moment sperm met egg. You know the story. I have to add all these bells and whistles to get you to pay attention to it, and you still don't see it. You're still not seeing this. Well, here's an incomplete woman and an incomplete man. The closer that ascension, I'm focused on self-mastery. The closer they get to self-mastery, they're moving closer and closer together. And then the union of those two things puts you at the top. but we see right past it. We're
Yeah.
looking at a forest.
Right. And also you can see, what was I saying? I lost my train of thought right now.
What do you think? I think you may have even mentioned this before. Give me the practical version of this. And I think, like, I don't expect you to even come up with this now. Self-mastery, it's entirely introspective. And as I'm asking you the question, I'm thinking, well, you can't tell people what to do. And if you did, you're the snake oil salesman. Because you're telling them maybe what worked for you or what you think will work, or again you're turning around from the fight to lend a hand to someone behind you, and now we've been breached.
To me, self-mastery has become a process of negation, in the sense of, am I this? No, I'm not. Am I this? No, I'm not. And I keep finding what I'm not. Everywhere I look, in whatever extremes, I choose not to be this. No, I choose, and in that refinement, I'm slowly starting, well, I choose to be honorable. Okay, like, let's define honor. What is honor? It's not giving in to my desires. It's turning in the desert. Jesus goes in the desert for 40 days and 40 nights and turns his back to the devil, saying, you can have all of this kingdom and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to compare myself to that, because I'm not, but I'm trying to just take him as a guide, or take all of these manifestations of wisdom, of the right way of being, of people that have come before me, because we stand on shoulders of giants, right? And there's books, there's tons of knowledge everywhere, and now you can access knowledge through your little black device, so the thirst for knowledge has been like one of the things that has driven me to be how I am, plus my experiences. And now I'm slowly realizing that the knowledge that I need is not external. There's nothing extrinsic of me that can fix me.
Yeah.
It's internal, and it's the greatest fight of my life.
The battle, the solution, the hero, the enemy, all of those things are psyche.
Right.
It's all within you.
And the hero's journey is just magnitudinal, in the sense that, okay, I've journeyed through, like you see, you journey through Lord of the Rings. Now you can journey through, whatever next journey you're learning process. And at some time, part of life is, family, and passing on this knowledge and making it so my daughter and my future kids have this already instilled in them, so they can work at being better than I've been. And that's, I think,
so the moment your shield goes down,
exactly,
it's up.
And I think that's what we've lost with modern society, what we've lost with not knowing our ancestry, what we lost with just thinking that those are things that aren't important. You have the line of your people dates back to the beginning of time, and you've forgotten it, in a sense. You don't care because you have a cell phone, and because drinking, and because of all these things, but they're still behind you, and they're still waiting for you to discover them and make them proud. So how
are you using that gift?
How are you using that gift? For example, like I said, like the line of your people goes back to the beginning of time, but I choose to castrate myself and be a woman. That just blows my mind.
That you see the same.
Or I choose to be gay. Okay, like, or I can always adopt. That's not your line of people, like. And I don't want to. This is just my beliefs, but it seems like, your people are my generations that fought famine, had fought war, had fought all these things in order for me to be able to sit here and talk to you on the phone.
And give it up because you want a jet ski.
Exactly. To me, it just blows my mind, man.
Yeah, it's, again, selfishness and selflessness are the same thing in that act. Self-mastery.
Yeah.
That's good enough for me, dude.
It's good enough for me too.
All right, I'm gonna shut it down. That live stream ended like, I don't know how long ago.
Did you record